those organizations that are going to try and push the boulder back up the hill, are going to try and cut costs and make efficiencies, they're actually going to be optimizing things that will not be needed.
Exactly.
So they may do whatever they're doing today slightly more efficiently, but X amount of months down the line, that thing's not going to be needed at all. Because you're not going to have that thing, you're not going to need that thing. So a short-term efficiency is actually going to be, in the medium term, deeply ineffective.
Well, and you're wasting time.
Yeah.
By not understanding what's important.
Okay,
so we have a client that spent almost 2 years mapping and inventorying all of their processes, and they didn't actually change anything. They just mapped and inventoried everything. And we said, okay, that's great. Now your processes actually evolve over time. So if you think about that, you've mapped stuff that's no longer relevant, and you probably, most of those things you could have thrown out and drawn a new process. So you could have been half of the way there to your new operating model already, but you focused 2 years on mapping and inventorying everything diligently.
So that's where we do maps, because
exactly.
the key thing is evolution. Everything changes, so you need to map currently, but also to see how it's going to change, and how you skate to where the puck is going, not to where the puck currently is at the moment.
I'm a firm believer of not polishing the brass on a sinking ship, kind of.
That's a politer version of the saying.
Yeah, so it's very often, I think, in business, there's too much effort put into optimizing the old model versus finding the new.
Isn't that just a lack of imagination?
No, it's the trap of the S-curve. The Clay Christensen, the innovator's dilemma. It's what got Steve Jobs fired. The old Apple II S-curve was at its peak still. Nobody saw the decline coming. They had optimized everything. And Steve Jobs thought, the world is in a closed system. People don't need to think about all this stuff. They just want it to be well-designed, user-friendly, beautiful, easy to use, whatever. And the old Apple II wanted to make their computers more like PCs. They were so confident in it, they ended up getting him fired, and they almost bankrupted the company. When they brought him back, he said, okay, we kill the old phase of development. Everybody who's interested in Apple II, out of here. And he focused everybody on Macintosh. And that, it's created a standard that's very interesting, because Apple as a company is very focused on this kind of excellent, being the best, and so on. But they're not necessarily focused on giving the customer the most flexibility, which was that whole PC mindset of you build your own, you're in control of absolutely everything. So that concept of constantly optimizing the old model, I think it's a trap. And it's the what do they call it? There's two traps in the S-curve. One of them is called the founder's trap. So the people that think up the new model are not always the best people to drive it to scale. And the other one is the Midas trap. Everything turns to gold. They're so into this kind of machine that's generating all the money that they can't see the potential failure. And then it hits. Because the main reason for that is that customer preferences, needs, behavior have changed, but they were so locked into the trap of the old model that they don't see it happening.
Well, that's where one of the opportunities are now with Corona, because you and I both believe, I think that's happening to a lot of organizations in slow motion. Now you don't need to wait for that to catch you out, because it's going to catch you out really quickly. So the other thing about the sigmoid curve is that you want to use your resources to transition to the new whilst you still have value. So at the moment, this is a hugely scary time, but it's a huge opportunity for those who are able to move quickly, which is our definition of agility. It's not a big A with we do Scrum, we do Kanban, we do this. It's about, do we now adapt quite quickly? And the idea is that yes, and I think that's where the idea of trying to focus on value and creating value, you don't need to figure out the direction, because that is the direction. Your customers will tell you which way that you're actually going, and their needs are going to evolve dramatically over the coming months and years. So as long as you're following that always gives you your direction. You just have to make sure that you are able to respond to that quickly. But you don't respond to that quickly if you're a structured organization with everything that's best practice, that you can't move without filling out forms. You're going to need to be a lot looser than this. But that looseness that lack of control doesn't have to be scary.
Fluid is a good word.
Flow is another one. I think the Eastern thinking is very much about having a river. You then put, your strategic advantage is the river upstream. So you can remove obstacles upstream, you can put in constraints, like you put in riverbanks to stop it flooding. That gives you the direction. But if you focus on making the river flow, that becomes your strategic advantage. The river will then naturally hit the sea at some point, no matter what's ahead, because that advantage there, it will either strike at empty spaces, and we know on this market there's lots of empty spaces. Just focusing on user needs is an empty space. But if the river is powerful enough, it will move obstacles out of the way. So at the moment, you can't know what's coming, but you can focus on those things that are actually within your control about increasing the flow or the fluidity of what you're doing.